I have told this once properly in the whole of my life, and I am going to tell it again now because the men who could have corrected me are gone and the man who should have told it never would. He did not think it was a story. He thought it was just the thing you do. That was the trouble with him, and it was the whole of him, and I have spent 60 years trying to be even a quarter of it. We took the saddle at Hessen Reach a little after the second dawn, when the long light came up over the Karo Ridge and turned the dust the color of a struck match. I was 19. I had a rifle I had fired in anger exactly 4 times, and I had not hit anything I could be sure of, and I was glad of that in a private way I would not have admitted to anyone. We had been told the Vural would not give up the saddle. We had been told they did not give up anything, that surrender was not a word their tongue could shape, that you went up a Vural-held slope expecting to bury what came back down. And then the saddle was ours by mid-morning, and there were Vural lying in the rock with their hides split open and their breath whistling, and they had not died the way we were promised they would. They had simply run out of the parts of themselves that fight. I want you to understand what the Vural were to us, because if you do not understand it, then the rest will sound small, and it was not small. They were the thing the colonies frightened their children with, and the frightening was earned. They came in caste bands, each band marked at the wrist with a burned tally, and the tally was the whole of a Vural standing in the world. A Vural was not a name. A Vural was a number seared into the inside of the wrist at hatching and added to, brand by brand, all down the years, so that an old Vural's forearm was a ladder of scar. Rank was a number. Debt was a number. A prisoner taken by the Vural was a number 2, the old marks burned flat and a new one set in, lower than any free Vural could carry, so that for the rest of his life the captive wore on his own arm the arithmetic of his defeat. We had seen what they did. We had found our own people that the Vural had taken and let go, years later, with the colony brand cut away and the captive number burned where it had been. Those people did not come all the way back. A man can outlive almost anything except being told, in the only language his own body speaks, that he is a quantity and not a person. So when the saddle was ours and the order came down to bring the Vural wounded to the aid line, I thought I knew what was coming. I thought we would do to them what they did, because that is the law of the wrist and everyone obeys the law of the wrist, and a part of me, I am not proud of it, but I am too old to lie about it now, a part of me wanted it. I had carried a friend off that slope in 2 trips because he would not fit in one, and I wanted the things that had done it to him to wear our number for the rest of their lives and know what it meant. The aid line was a run of white canvas pitched along the flat of the saddle where the wind came off the ridge and kept the flies down. By noon the sun stood straight over it, and the canvas lit up like the inside of a lantern, so that everything under it, the cots, the men, the wounded Vural laid in rows on the swept rock, everything was washed in that hard, clean light with no shadow in it to hide in. I had never been inside an aid station. I had thought it would be dim. It was the brightest place I had ever stood, brighter than the open hillside, the whole tent glowing white with the day coming through the cloth, and I remember thinking it was an odd place to do the worst kind of work, all that light and nowhere to look away. There were 41 of them. I counted because counting was something to do with my hands and my eyes that was not looking at faces. 41 Vural wounded, laid in 2 rows on the rock with their wrists turned up, because that is how a Vural surrenders, wrist up, tally bared, the worst of himself offered first. They knew what was coming. Every one of them turned his wrist to the light without being told, and lay there waiting for it, and the ones who could still make sound made a low, even drone that I learned later was not fear. It was the readiness. They were ready to be numbered. They had numbered their own captives 1,000 times, and they understood the arithmetic from both ends, and they lay there in the white light with their arms turned out, waiting for us to do the only correct thing, which was to burn our victory into their hide. Doc Renner was at the head of the line when I came in. I want to set him down for you exactly, because the version of him that lives in books, if it lives anywhere, is too clean, and he was not clean. He was a big slow man from the timber country up past the Vel, and he had been a joiner before the war, A man who fitted doors and hung beams, and he had a joiner's hands wide, scarred across the knuckles, a thumbnail gone black from some long-ago hammer. He moved the way big men move when they have learned not to break things, careful, deliberate, taking up no more room than he had to. He kept a pencil behind his ear, not a writing pencil, a carpenter's pencil, the flat oval kind that will not roll off a beam, soft black graphite in a body of cheap pale wood, sharpened with a knife to a chisel point. He had carried it the whole war. I think it was the last thing he had from the life before, and he kept it the way other men kept a photograph, except that he used it every day, all day, the way he had used it on the job, marking, measuring, setting a line on a thing before he cut it. When I came in, he was kneeling at the first Vural in the row, and the Vural had its wrist turned up, and I saw the brand stylus on the kit roll beside him. We had taken Vural kit off the saddle, and the stylus was Vural make, a stub of dark metal with a heating element and the prisoner glyph already set in it, the low captive number that every taken thing wore. Someone up the chain had decided we would use their own tool on them, which had a kind of justice in it that I could feel in my teeth. The stylus was there. The Vural's wrist was there, turned up, bared, waiting. And Doc looked at the stylus for a while, kneeling there in all that white light, and then he reached up and took the pencil from behind his ear instead. I did not understand what I was seeing. I do not think anyone did. He took the pencil and he tore a strip off the roll of white cloth tape we used for dressings, a strip maybe as long as a man's hand, and he laid it across his own thigh to write on it. Then he leaned in close to the Vural, close enough that the thing could have torn his throat out if it had wanted to and had anything left to do it with. And he said, in that slow timber country voice, the same words he would say 40 more times before the day was done. "What do they call you?" The Vural did not understand him, of course. None of them had our speech. But Doc waited, the way you wait for a frightened animal with his weight settled and his eyes easy, and he tapped his own chest and said his name, Renner. And then he touched the air over the Vural's chest, an open question, and waited again. It took a long time. The light came down through the canvas, and the wind came off the ridge, and 40 Vural lay there with their wrists turned up, not understanding why the burning had not started, and Doc waited on the first one. And then the Vural made a sound. 3 falling notes, a thing like a word, and it turned its head away when it made the sound, because to a Vural a name is the most private thing there is, the thing the Empire burns away first, the thing you are only before they make you a number. It gave him the sound the way you give up something you expect to lose anyway. And Doc bent over the strip of tape on his thigh, and he set the pencil to it, and he wrote, in the big square carpenter's print he used for marking lumber, what the sound had been. He did the best he could with our letters. He got it wrong, probably. But he wrote it down, the name, not a number, and then he took the strip and he wound it gentle around the Vural's wrist, over the old tally, over the ladder of scar, and he pressed the ends so it would hold, and he sat back. The Vural looked at its wrist. I was close enough to see it, and I will see it till I die. The thing turned its arm in the white light and looked at the band of tape with the clumsy human letters on it, and it did not understand, and then it did, all at once, the way understanding comes, that it had not been numbered, that it had been asked, that a thing it had given up as gone, the sound that was its own and no one else's, had been written down and given back to it to wear on the outside, where the number should have been. It made a sound then that I had no name for at the time. I have a name for it now. It is the sound a person makes when they have prepared their whole life for one ending and are handed another, and the preparation has nowhere to go, and it comes out of them all at once. The Vural wept. I did not know they could. I do not think they knew they could. It lay in the bright tent with a human carpenter's name band on its wrist, and it wept like something coming apart, and Doc Renner put one of his wide, scarred hands flat on its shoulder and held it there, steady, the way you'd steady a green beam while the glue set, and he said, all right now, and he moved to the next one. There were 40 more. He did every one. He did it the same way each time, the question, the wait, the sound given up, the name set down in carpenter's print. The band wound on over the scar. Some of them would not give him the sound for a long while. One, near the middle of the row, a big old virile with a wrist that was nothing but ladder, scar on scar on scar going up past the elbow, would not answer him at all. It lay there with its wrist turned up and its eyes shut and the readiness drone going in its chest, waiting to be numbered, refusing to be anything but numbered, because being numbered was a thing it understood and being asked was not. Doc stayed with that one a long time. He did not force it. He just stayed, kneeling there with the pencil in his hand and the strip of tape blank on his thigh, and he waited, and the line of light moved across the rock as the sun came over, and at last the old virile opened its eyes and looked at the human who would not go away, who would not pick up the stylus, who was waiting on it the way no one had waited on it in all the long arithmetic of its life. And it gave him the sound. 2 notes low. And Doc wrote it down. I have to tell you about the officer now, because he is the one the whole thing turns on, and because of what he became. There was a virile among the 41 who was not like the others. You could tell rank in a virile by the wrist, and his was a high one, the tally clean and ordered, no captive mark anywhere on it, the arm of a virile who had done the taking all his life and never once been taken. He had a wound through the side that should have killed him and had not, and he lay at the end of the row watching everything with eyes that did not weep and did not waver. The men called him the sub-marshal because we found a band marker on him that meant something like that. His own people called him Vekoran, though we did not learn it from a tally. We learned it because Doc asked him, the same as he asked all of them. When Doc came to the end of the row and knelt at the officer and asked his question and tapped his own chest and said his name, the officer did not give him the sound. The officer spoke. He had a little of our speech. They always have a little, the high ones, because you learn the tongue of the thing you mean to rule, and he used it. He said, "You will mark us. It is owed. We marked your kind. Take what is owed and have done." And Doc, kneeling there, said, "I'm not going to do that." "It is owed," the officer said again, and there was something terrible under the flat way he said it, because a virile who has done the taking all his life needs the taking to be real, needs the arithmetic to balance, or else what was it all for? We did not spare. You will not spare. Mark us and be a soldier. Do not, and here his speech failed him. He did not have the word, and he turned his clean wrist up in the light and struck it with his other hand, the gesture for the brand, demanding it. Do not unmake the world. Doc looked at him for a while. The whole line had gone quiet. 40 virile with name bands on their wrists lay in the white light and watched their sub-marshal demand to be burned. And we men of the 6th stood at the edges of the tent and watched too, and I do not think a one of us breathed. "What's your name?" Doc said, not asking now, just saying it slow like setting a line on a beam before you cut. "I am a number to you," the officer said. "Make me one." "What's your name?" Doc said again. And the officer broke, not the way the first one had broken all at once, weeping. He broke the way old timber breaks, slow, with a long sound in it, a thing that has held a great weight for a great while and is only now, with the weight a little shifted, discovering how tired it is. He said the sound that was his name, Vekoran. And he turned his face away into the bright rock so the human would not see, and Doc wrote it down in his square carpenter's print, getting it as near as our letters would carry, and he wound the band around the clean high wrist over no scar at all, and he pressed the ends and he said, "There. That's done." And he sat back on his heels and looked at the whole row of them, 41 virile wearing their own names in a human's bad handwriting, and he was so tired he was gray, and he put the pencil back behind his ear. Now I have to tell you the cost, because there was a cost, and the men who make this into a clean story leave it out, and leaving it out is a kind of lie I will not tell. Not all of them lived. Of the 41, 11 were too far gone, and they died over the next 2 days under the white canvas, in the bright light, with the name bands on their wrists. I want you to know that I sat with 3 of them at the end because Doc asked me to, and I did not know how to say no to him. And I will tell you that it is a different thing to sit with a dying creature that has a name than to sit with one that has a number. I had wanted them numbered. I had carried my friend off the slope in 2 trips, and I had wanted these things to wear our number forever. And I sat in the bright tent and held the wrist of a dying Vural turned up, the way they offer it, and I read the clumsy letters Doc had printed there, the sound it had given up as gone and been given back, and I could not make the wanting come back. It had gone out of me. A name will do that. A name is the thing that makes the arithmetic stop working, and once it stops working you cannot make it start again, and I have been grateful for that every day of my life since, even the days I did not want to be. There was trouble over it too. I will not pretend there was not. A colonel came up to the saddle the second day, a hard, clean man who had lost more than I had and earned the right to be hard, and he saw the row of Vural with the name bands, and he was angry in the cold way that frightens you more than shouting. He wanted them numbered. He had the stylus brought, the captive glyph already set in it, and he stood over Doc and told him that we did not coddle the Vural, that the Vural understood one language, and it was the language of the wrist, that a name band was a sentiment, and the Vural would read sentiment as weakness, and there were colonies depending on the Vural reading us as something other than weak. And every word of it was true. That is the thing I most want you to understand. The colonel was not a fool, and he was not a monster. Every word of it was true, and Doc heard him out kneeling with the pencil behind his ear, and when the colonel was done Doc stood up, and he was a big man, he came up slow, and the colonel had to look up at him, and he said, "Sir, I'll number any man that orders me to. But I won't be the one tells him it was the right thing. That's all I've got to say about it." And he did not pick up the stylus. I think about that often. He did not refuse the order, because he was not a man who refused orders, and he was not making himself the hero of it. He told the colonel plainly that he'd do it if it was ordered. He just would not pretend, and he would not lift the tool until the words were spoken that made it the colonel's and not his. And the colonel stood there in the white light with 41 Vural watching, the 11 dying ones and the 30 who would live, all of them with their names on their wrists in a joiner's bad print, and the colonel looked at them, and at Doc, and at us boys at the edge of the tent who had carried our friends off the slope and were watching to see what kind of thing we were going to be, and he did not give the order. He turned and walked out into the day, and we never spoke of it again, and the name band stayed. The 30 who lived were taken back through the lines for exchange, the way prisoners were, and they wore the name bands the whole way. And here is the part that the people who tell this story do not believe when I tell it, but I was there and I am telling you it is true. They would not let the bands be taken off. When the rear area men tried to process them properly, to log them by number the way prisoners were logged, the Vural, these creatures we had been promised could not surrender, could not be anything but the arithmetic of conquest. These Vural covered the bands with their other hand, and made the low drone that I had thought was fear and had learned was readiness, and they would not give them up. A name, you see. Once you have worn your own name on the outside, in the place where the number goes, you do not go back to being a number willingly. We had not known that about them. I do not think they had known it about themselves. And the officer, Vekoran, I have to finish with him because his is the thread the whole thing hangs from, and I only know the end of it second hand, but I trust the man who told me. He went back in the exchange. He was a high one, and the Vural wanted him back, and we wanted our own high ones that they held. And so he went, with the name band on his clean wrist, and we thought that was the end of it. But the war ground on for 2 more years, and in the second year there began to be a thing in the Vural lines that no one could account for. Prisoners we took started coming to us already named. The Vural began sending across, in the exchanges, lists of names, their own names in their own ugly script, a thing they had never done, a thing the whole architecture of their empire was built to prevent. And the colony people the Vural had taken in those last years came back different than the ones before. The brand was still there. They still burned the captive number in, because an empire does not change its arithmetic in a day. But under the number, scratched in with whatever the captive could find, a nail, a stone, there began to be names. The Vural had started letting them keep the names. Someone high up in the Vural had decided that the name could stay under the number, and had made the others allow it, and had spent his standing, that clean, ordered tally, that whole life of never being taken, spent all of it pushing a thing through that empire that the empire was built to forbid. I do not have proof it was him. I have a band of white tape with a joiner's bad handwriting on it, that came back to us in the last exchange of the war with no body attached, no message, just the band, sent across the lines to the 6th colonial field with nothing on it but the name in our letters, Vekoran, worn soft and gray with 2 years of being carried on a wrist. He had kept it. Through everything he had done and everything it cost him, he had kept it, and at the end he sent it back. And I have always read that as the only thanks a Vural knew how to give, to return the thing intact, having carried it as far as it would go. Doc did not make anything of it. I showed him the band when it came, and he turned it over in his big scarred hands, and he was quiet a while, and then he gave it back to me and said, well, he had a name, and he went back to work. That was the whole of him. He did not think he had done a thing. He thought he had asked a question that anyone would ask, and written down the answer the way you write down any measurement before you cut, because you do not cut a thing you have not first named. He was a joiner. You do not put a number on a beam. You mark it for what it is. I am very old now. Doc has been gone a long time. He went home to the timber country after the war and fitted doors and hung beams for another 40 years and died with sawdust in his hands, which is the death he would have chosen. I went up to see him near the end, and we did not talk about the saddle, because he did not think it was a story, and I did not yet know how to make him understand that it was the only story I had. But before I left, he put something in my hand and closed my fingers over it and said, "You've earned the keeping of it more than me." And it was the pencil. The flat oval carpenter's pencil, worn down now to a stub no longer than my thumb, the cheap pale wood gone dark with 60 years of handling, the soft black graphite point still chisel-cut the way he always cut it with his knife. I have it here. I turn it in my fingers while I tell you this, the way I have turned it 10,000 times. It is a stub of cheap wood and a little soft graphite, worth nothing, the kind of thing a man loses out of his pocket and never misses. And with it, in the brightest tent I was ever in, a slow, big, quiet man wrote 41 names where the number should have gone, and unmade a thing in the Vural that all our rifles never touched, and gave me back a part of myself I had been ready to burn away on a hillside at 19. They told us the Vural could not surrender. They were right in a way. The Vural never did surrender to us, not really, not the saddle, not the war. What they surrendered to, one wrist at a time in all that white light, was the question, what do they call you? It turned out that was the thing none of them in all the long arithmetic of that empire had ever been able to hold the line against, not the rifles, the question. Give a thing a number, and you can do anything to it. Ask its name and you can't.